Hello everybody, welcome to the Python tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to decide the salaries for different types of workers in a restaurant. In order to do so, I will create an employee class first, and then from this employee class, I will derive the chef, waiter, and cleaner classes. Each position will have its own scheme of the salary settings differently. So, for example, a chef will have his or her salary based on his or her hourly wage together with the basic salary. And for the waiter, it depends on the monthly salary plus the tips and the basic salary. And for the cleaner, he or she will earn the monthly salary plus the extra hours of work based on his or her hourly wage in this situation. And a cleaner also has the basic salary. Let us see how we implement the classes. The first class to create is the employee class. And for the employee class, I need an initializer. When I use the initializer, I want to set up the basic salary, which has a default value of $500. So if I don't put any value into the employee initializer, the basic salary would mean $500 immediately. Here I would define an instanced variable for the employee object. Self.basic salary equals basic salary. It means that I will put the value obtained from the user input, which becomes the argument of the employee object, to be the value stored in as the instance variable of that object. And after I've defined the employee class, I can derive other classes from it. I have a chef, which inherits from the employee class. So the chef class will inherit the basic salary instance variable. When I set up the initializer for the chef class, we will have a similar structure for the initializer. Here, we can see that the parameters of the initializer would be having hourly wage, hours, and day. How about the basic salary pertaining to the employee class? We don't need to specify it here in the chef initializer because it is already inherited from the employee class. So in the chef initializer, we simply need to add some new parameters specific to a chef object. In order to set up the basic salary for a chef, I can use the super keyword to simply employ the initializer of the employee class. And 550 here refers to the basic salary I'm going to put into the basic salary instance variable of a chef object. 550 here is going to override the default value of 500. So the basic salary is no longer the value inherited from the employee class directly. It would be 550. can also set up the instance variable specific to the chef class. Okay, I simply pass the argument obtained from the user input to the chef initializer. And for the chef class, I need a formula to find out the monthly income of a particular chef. When I use this self keyword here, it means that I will pass the particular chef object to the get monthly income method. How can I get the monthly income for a chef? I can use the formula like this. Okay, the formula is dependent on the hourly wage and the number of hours and the number of days in a month. After I've got the hourly wage component, I will add the basic salary component. So the final result of the get monthly income method will be like this. Here, the word self refers to the object itself. So when I pass a certain chef object, the instance variable will be taken from that object. And then I can set up the class for a waiter. And of course, a waiter inherits from the employee class. I can set up the initializer for a waiter class. A waiter depends on the monthly salary and the tips he or she received. In order to include the basic salary component for the waiter, I have to inherit the basic salary instance variable from the superclass of waiter, which is the employee class. Here, the basic salary for a waiter is $600 rather than the default value of $500 only. I create an instance variable called monthly salary. I also create another instance variable for the waiter class called tips. And these two instance variables will be having the value obtained from the argument of the waiter initializer. How can we determine the monthly income for a waiter? We can create the get monthly income method for the waiter class. Okay, the monthly income for a waiter will be dependent on the monthly salary together with the tips he or she earns plus the basic salary. Okay, we can define a cleaner class, which is based on the employee class. Okay, a cleaner has other components. It is initializer, monthly salary, the extra hours he or she has worked, and the extra hourly wage for the extra hours. Here I simply use the default value of the basic salary instance variable from the employee class directly. So the basic salary for a cleaner is $500. When we don't put the value in the parentheses following the init command, it means that we simply use the default value. Okay, we can create more instance variables for the cleaner class. They are simply obtained from the argument when somebody is setting up a cleaner object. How can we determine the monthly income for a cleaner? First, we set up a method called getMonthlyIncome. And then we insert the formula into the method. Okay, I need 2 lines to complete the definition of the monthly income of a cleaner. Monthly salary together with the money obtained from the extra hours of work together with the basic salary. Okay, we have already defined the classes for different posts. So how can we find out the salaries for particular objects? Let us see some examples. Suppose I have a chef called Peter. The arguments for this chef object will be 28 and 26. When we look back to the chef initializer, it means that the hourly wage is 20. The number of hours of work in a day is 8, and Peter has worked for 26 days. But we want to calculate the Peter's salary. We can use the method pertaining to Peter. We don't need to put anything between the parentheses because when we refer to the getMonthlyIncome method for the chef class, we simply need to pass the object itself, which is Peter, into the getMonthlyIncome method. And for Python, we don't need to put Peter explicitly into the parentheses. And then we can print out the salary for Peter later. Suppose we have another guy called Gary. He is a waiter. I put two values to the waiter initializer. Monthly salary is 3,000 and tips is 200. I don't need to put the basic salary because it is already set as $600 when we create the initializer for a waiter object. I can call the get monthly income method from the waiter class in order to determine the salary for Gary. We can print the salary for Gary later. We have another employee called Michael. He is a cleaner. So I need to put 3 values into the initializer of a cleaner. Excuse me. Monthly salary is 3,500 and extra hours of work in this month is 15 hours and the wage for the extra hours will be 20 per hour. I can do the same for Michael by calling the get monthly income method pertaining to a cleaner class. Okay, and we can do something more based on the salaries for these 3 people. Suppose the income for the restaurant in a month is $20,000. We can determine the profit very roughly as the income minus the salary for the 3 workers. And then we can print out the profit. Okay, let us see the result coming from these lines of code. Okay, we will get these values. The first line refers to Peter's salary, and the second line refers to Gary's salary. The third line refers to Michael's salary, and the final value would refer to the profit, which is obtained by subtracting the salaries of these 3 workers from the income. Okay. When we look back to the chef class, we can verify that this value is obtained by manipulating these 3 values. And you can check that the salary for Gary and Michael would be based on these 2 return values separately. My code is intuitive and straightforward. However, it may not always be the best or the most efficient solution to the problem. If you can think about any idea to improve my code, feel free to post your improvement on the comment section below the video. If you like this video, please give me a like and please subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching.